At noon that day, the atmosphere in Manhattan brimmed with its familiar liveliness. Right in the heart of the city, where rows of tall trees lined the park and fountains whispered under the sunlight, there was a place the elite regarded as their private oasis: Parkside Café. The space here always evoked a certain elusive glamour, the crisp laughter of business magnates, the soft clink of crystal glasses, the scent of buttered toast blending with freshly roasted coffee. The moment one stepped inside, it felt like the outside world had retreated, leaving only an enclave of luxury behind. Richard Bennett sat at the central table, reserved for important guests. 72 years old, he needed no introduction. His name was tied to the city's towering skyscrapers and countless real estate deals the press once called the redefinition of New York's skyline. At an age when many chose retirement, Richard still carried an unmistakable aura of power. His tailored dark gray suit hugged his frame, his gold-rimmed glasses caught the noon light, and every slow, deliberate gesture radiated the presence of a man accustomed to commanding not just a room, but an entire city. Across from him sat Claudia, his wife, nearly 3 decades his junior. She was as striking as if she had stepped straight from a fashion magazine cover, sleek black hair framing her face, crimson lips vivid under the daylight, and on her wrist, a diamond bracelet glittered like a declaration of status. Everything about Claudia appeared perfectly staged, except for one detail. Her smile stopped at her lips and never reached her eyes. While Richard focused on the menu, Claudia leaned slightly to the side, idly twisting the bracelet on her wrist, a habit and a signal that her mind was elsewhere. The tableau looked normal to a casual observer, a billionaire and his young wife enjoying an elegant lunch. Yet beneath that polished veneer ran hairline cracks. Richard looked confident, yet his movements carried a subtle slowness, and the sharpness in his eyes was occasionally tinged with fatigue. Claudia was all charm and poise, yet her gaze lingered more on her phone screen than the wealthy man across from her. The silence between them was not one of a slender boy was just outside the low iron fence surrounding Parkside Café, crouched beneath the shade of a tree. His oversized gray hoodie seemed to swallow his frail frame, the long sleeves hanging so far down they nearly covered his hands. His worn-out sneakers, their tips patched with duct tape, clattered faintly each time he shifted. That appearance was utterly out of place against the world of luxury only a few meters away. His name was Malik Johnson, and he was only 12 years old, yet his face bore the deep lines of experiences many adults had never endured. He had been drifting on the streets for months since his mother died in an accident. His father had long since vanished from his life. In society's eyes, Malik had become the invisible child. Everyone knew he existed, but no one truly looked at him. The gnawing hunger in Malik's stomach kept his eyes fixed on the plates of food inside. Steaming bowls of soup, crusty, fragrant bread, grilled meat glistening with sauce. He swallowed hard, his dark eyes glinting with the hunger for food and the hunger to belong somewhere. But then, in that seemingly ordinary moment, Malik's attention caught on the table of Richard and Claudia. He saw what no one else did: Claudia's slender, pale hand slipping into her designer handbag. Just one slight, subtle movement, so deft her husband never noticed. Her fingers closed around a small vial, twisted it open, and tilted it gently over the rim of a soup bowl. A clear drop fell, then a few more, vanishing completely into the golden broth. Not a single guest turned their head, and no staff member noticed. The room remained lost in its chatter and the aroma of roasted coffee. Only Malik, the homeless boy, dismissed as invisible, saw it all. He froze, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. His mind spun between two choices: walk away, pretend he hadn't seen, or step forward and speak a truth no one would believe. Because Malik knew well. Who would listen to a ragged street kid in taped-up shoes? Who would believe him over a glamorous woman with a diamond bracelet and a practiced smile? Malik clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms as if to squeeze out a fragment of courage. In that instant, the world split in two. On one side, the lavish luxury, sparkling glasses of wine under the noon sun, the faint clink of cutlery. On the other side, Malik, the boy in a gray hoodie, shoes patched with duct tape, his trembling hands gripping the cold iron rail outside the cafe. Every rational voice urged him to stay silent. Do nothing. No one will believe you. If you step in, they'll shoo you away, call you a troublemaker, maybe drag you onto the street. But in Malik's young chest, his heart hammered as if to shout, if I stay quiet, he'll die right in front of me. Bernard, the wealthy, powerful man, was lifting a spoon to his lips, his eyes still glued to his phone screen. Claudia sat opposite him, her face sculpted to beauty, maintaining a gentle smile while the corner of her mouth twitched, like someone who has just set a trap and is waiting for the prey to take the bait. Malik bit his lip. His throat went dry. Then suddenly his feet moved as if pushed by an invisible force. He slid over the low fence, squeezed between the expensive tables, ignoring the irritated looks of the diners. And then, with all the courage packed into that small body, Malik shouted, "Don't eat! Don't eat that!" The sound rang out, tearing through the previously placid air. Conversations stopped, laughter cut off. A glass fell and shattered, making the silence even more oppressive. Bernard froze. The soup spoon hovered just before his mouth, a trembling drop of golden broth slipping toward the table. The old but keen eyes lifted and met a gaunt boy standing there, chest heaving, eyes alight with fear and determination. Claudia spun her head around. The sweetness in her eyes had turned into an icy blade. Her voice snapped out, thin and sharp. "What did you say?" Malik did not back down, his voice shaking but firm. She put something in your soup. I saw it all. Please don't eat it." A ripple of commotion rose like a wave. Nearby diners gaped, a few murmured. Several phones were lifted to record. Meanwhile, Bernard slowly set the spoon down, his veined hands trembling slightly. He looked at his wife, then at the boy, his gaze mixed with confusion and the atmosphere inside Parkside Café was so heavy it could have been sliced into pieces. The soup spoon lay abandoned on the table's edge, a golden drop spreading across the pristine white tablecloth. Every pair of eyes was locked on three figures: the wealthy man Bernard Green, the homeless boy Malik, and the elegant woman Claudia, the one just accused in front of everyone. Bernard pressed both hands against the table, his gaze intently on his wife. "Claudia, what did this boy just say? He claims you put something in my food." Claudia forced a smile, but it was strained, stripped of the sophistication she had worn moments earlier. She lifted her chin high, her voice sharp yet betraying a hidden tremor. "You seriously believe a street kid? Look at him, torn hoodie, duct-taped shoes. He's just making up a story to get a few coins." The crowd began to murmur. A woman whispered, "The boy looks terrified, but he's also very determined." Another man frowned. "But look at the wife. Why would she lash out like that if she were innocent?" Bernard remained silent. His eyes shifted from his wife to Malik. And that silence, colder and sharper than any outburst, was more terrifying than a shout. The atmosphere inside Parkside Café felt compressed, as if the air had been wound tight. Every patron's breath could be heard. Bernard Green leaned back, his aging yet sharply alert eyes fixed squarely on his wife. He said nothing, but that look stripped Claudia of the composure she had been wearing like a mask. Malik, the homeless boy in a threadbare hoodie, stood alone among tailored suits and silk dresses. His young face and bright, determined eyes were like a small flame burning through Claudia's perfect facade. Claudia slammed her hand onto the table, her voice high and cutting. "Bernard, you can't be serious. Are you really going to believe a street kid over the woman who's stood by you all these years?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. "That she's clearly shaking. And the boy doesn't look like he's making it up." Bernard set down his spoon and slowly swirled the crystal glass in his hand. His voice was low and authoritative. "Claudia, we've been together for so many years. I've never seen you react like this unless there's something to hide." Claudia went pale. Her lips trembled. She was about to speak when the distant wail of a police siren cut through the air. A few patrons pulled out their phones to film. The usual contemptuous smile on Claudia's face vanished, replaced by panic. Malik drew a deep breath. His voice trembled but remained resolute. "I don't want anything from you, but I saw her pour a clear liquid into his soup. If I stay quiet, you'll never get another chance to live." The entire cafe fell silent. At that moment, Bernard gave a slight nod, as if he had made his choice. The wail of sirens grew louder. The cafe's glass windows trembled as a police cruiser suddenly stopped outside Parkside Café. No one inside dared to move. Every breath was held, as though the room awaited the blade that would finally lay bare the truth. Claudia, once the woman who entered this cafe with the poise of a queen, now clutched the handle of her designer handbag with trembling fingers. Sweat broke through the carefully applied makeup on her face. Her voice rose, high-pitched and uneven. "Bernard, you can't possibly believe this nonsense. A street rat has more credibility than your own wife." Bernard gave no reply. His cold, unwavering gaze locked onto her, and that silence was more terrifying than 100 accusations. It destabilized Claudia, leaving her ensnared by the very panic she herself had unleashed. The cafe doors swung open. 2 police officers strode in with firm, decisive steps, their eyes sweeping the room. One of them spoke, his voice low and authoritative. "We received a report of suspected poisoning here. Who's involved?" Bernard slowly pointed to the steaming bowl of soup on the table. His voice was calm yet unyielding. "Here, my wife. And the warning of this boy. Without him, I might not still be sitting here." Claudia let out a sharp, defiant laugh, but the sound rang hollow amid a sea of suspicious eyes. The officers stepped forward, bending to sniff at the soup. One officer's brow furrowed. He looked straight at Claudia. "Ma'am, do you have anything to say before we seal this dish for testing?" The pressure came down like a hammer. Claudia's composure was shattered. Her eyes blazed and her hands shook so violently that she nearly dropped her handbag. She screamed. "He should have collapsed long ago. I've had enough of living in his shadow, watching him control everything, even my breath. I just wanted freedom. I just wanted it all to end." A horrified gasp rippled through the cafe. Patrons who had only come for coffee and an elegant lunch now found themselves witnesses to a naked attempt at murder. Bernard closed his eyes, gripping his cane tightly, every wrinkle on his face deepening with pain. And Malik, the boy who had stood by the fence simply because of hunger. The door of Parkside Café slammed shut as police escorted Claudia away. The clatter of her high heels echoed unevenly, fading into the wail of sirens and the flash of blue and red lights outside. Inside the cafe, a heavy silence fell, so thick that the clink of a spoon on porcelain or the ragged breath of a shaken diner seemed to reverberate. Bernard Green sat motionless in his chair, his back slightly hunched as though the mountain of betrayal had compounded the weight of age. The man who had once commanded a real estate empire, who had made decisions affecting thousands, now felt small in the face of the truth that had just unraveled. His wife, the woman who had lunched with him for years, was the very one who had wanted to take his life. He removed his glasses with trembling fingers and gently set them on the table. His eyes, clouded with tears, were still fixed on the thin boy standing nearby. Shabby sneakers, a fraying hoodie, small hands clutching nervously at its hem. Malik stood frozen, unsure whether to slip away quietly or remain. He felt the weight of every gaze on him, not the dismissive glances of before, but ones filled with admiration and gratitude. An elderly patron with a crown of white hair slowly rose and began to clap. The sound rang out in the silence like a signal. Then others followed. Within seconds, the entire cafe erupted into applause. An ovation not for wealth or power, but courage. Malik flushed red, eyes downcast, his thin shoulders quivering. He wasn't used to praise. He wasn't used to being the center of anything. He had only existed on the margins for so long, watching others eat, speak, and live. Bernard leaned on his cane and rose with measured steps. He approached, placing a frail but warm hand on the boy's shoulder. His voice rasped, yet carried clearly. "Son, today you saved my life." Malik lifted his gaze, those deep, dark eyes glistening. He tried to speak, but his throat caught. All he managed was a trembling whisper. I just couldn't stand by and watch." Bernard nodded, eyes shining with a rare emotion he had spent a lifetime concealing. "In a room full of people with money and power, you, a boy without a home, dare..."
The entire room laughed, not mocking, but tender, touched, affectionate. Warmth spread through the cafe, dissolving the dark shadow of the trail lingering in the air. Bernard gave the boy's shoulder a light squeeze, a silent promise. In his eyes, a glimmer of hope returned for the first time in years, not for himself, but for the next generation, for the quiet souls who carried within them a strength no one expected. The chaotic noon at Parkside Café gradually subsided. The patrons left, yet they couldn't stop whispering about what they had just witnessed. The story of a street boy saving the life of one of the city's wealthiest business people spread faster than the afternoon news. Malik remained seated quietly, the steaming sandwich before him. He ate it slowly, bite by bite, glancing nervously around the room. He still couldn't believe he was sharing a table with Bernard Green. Bernard, after everything, retained the calm demeanor of a seasoned man, but his eyes carried more than just fatigue. They held the pain of betrayal, the deep gratitude toward the strange boy, and above all, a decision forming in his mind. He set his glass of water down and looked straight at Malik. "Do you have anywhere to go back to?" Malik hesitated, his eyes lowering. His thin little hand crumpled the napkin unconsciously. He didn't want to answer, but finally shook his head gently. "I usually sleep at the bus station, or in the park when the security guards don't chase me off." The cafe went utterly silent. The servers clearing tables overheard, their eyes softening with pity. Bernard closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a resolute gaze. "Then from today on, you won't have to sleep on the streets anymore." Malik's eyes widened. "You mean..." Bernard leaned forward, his voice warm but firm. "You saved my life. But that's not the only reason. I see in you something money cannot buy. Courage, honesty. If you'll allow me, I want to take you home with me tonight, just to begin with. I don't promise to change your whole life in a single day, but I promise you will have a safe roof over your head." Malik froze, forgetting even to swallow the half-bitten sandwich in his hand. He looked around as though to make sure he hadn't misheard. After years of wandering, he had learned not to believe in promises, since most were empty. But Bernard's eyes were different. They carried no pity. They carried the recognition of a man who had just realized a child had saved him. I don't know what to say. Malik crossed paths, bound by an act of courage, now stepping into a journey that would change both their lives forever. The black limousine glided through the city as dusk descended. Malik sat in the back seat, clutching the paper bag of food tightly, his eyes fixed on the passing view outside the window. Streets and towering buildings swept past, familiar yet overwhelming. He had never imagined sitting in a car like this, let alone imagining it would take him to a real home. When the car turned onto a quiet street lined with trees whispering in the breeze, Malik saw the great iron gate slowly open. Beyond it appeared a stately mansion, white walls, moss-green tiled roof, expansive windows glowing with warm, golden light. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding, wondering if this was a dream. The chauffeur stopped the car and stepped out to open the door. Bernard gently placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "Welcome home." Malik stepped out, his worn-out shoes slapping against the stone pavement. He froze, unable to move forward. This was worlds apart from his reality, the world of park benches, cold bus stations, and nights shivering in the dark. Sensing his hesitation, Bernard smiled. "This is also your home tonight, and if you wish, it can be longer." An elderly housekeeper appeared, bowing respectfully. "Mr. Green?" Her eyes flicked to Malik, briefly surprised yet absent of disdain. Bernard gave a simple introduction. "This is Malik, the boy who saved my life. From this moment on, consider him an honored guest in this house." Malik bowed his head, mumbling a greeting, his fingers crushing the paper bag until it wrinkled. The housekeeper nodded warmly. "The room is ready for him." They led him through a spacious hallway. Antique paintings adorned the walls, and the floor was covered with thick, soft carpet. Each step Malik took felt like stepping into another world. His heart thudded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The door opened to reveal a small but cozy bedroom with a bed dressed in crisp white sheets, a polished wooden desk, and a window overlooking a rose garden. Malik stood frozen. He couldn't remember the last time he had a proper place to sleep. Bernard saw the look in his eyes and spoke slowly. "My boy, sometimes we don't get to choose where we begin, but we can choose where we rest." Malik turned, his eyes bright. That night the grand mansion lay in silence. In the living room, the firelight from the fireplace cast flickering shadows across the aged face of Bernard Green. He sat alone, a glass of wine in his hand, yet its flavor no longer brought him the relaxation it once did. His heart was still shaken by what had happened that afternoon at the cafe, and by the fierce, unflinching gaze of the boy named Malik. He recalled the moment when the spoon stopped right before his lips and a trembling voice cried out, "Don't eat that." A homeless boy, thin, frail, with torn shoes, had dared to interrupt a world of luxury, dared to confront the scorn and fury of a powerful woman, all to save his life. If Malik had not been there, Bernard would not still be sitting here now. Bernard's eyes rose to the painting on the wall, a portrait of himself 30 years ago, shaking hands with partners at the grand opening of a skyscraper. The face in the frame brimmed with confidence, eyes gleaming with pride. But tonight he saw something else. Emptiness. His entire life had been spent building an empire, amassing wealth and power. Yet the one who saved him was not a bodyguard, lawyer, or billion-dollar connection. It was a boy with nothing but courage.
He set the wine glass down and rubbed his temples with trembling fingers. A question echoed through his mind. How many Maliks have I missed? How many invisible faces and overlooked souls while I was busy raising steel and glass towers? Bernard sighed and stepped onto the balcony. In the garden below, he noticed Malik's bedroom light was still on. The boy's slight silhouette sat by the window, his body slightly trembling, as if he still couldn't believe he had a home. The sight made Bernard's chest tighten. In that moment, he whispered to himself as if making a vow. Malik, you saved my life, and I will save yours. No, not just yours, but anyone out there who has been abandoned, ignored. It's time I give back more than just cold concrete towers. He turned, retrieving an old leather notebook from the desk drawer. A week after the incident at the cafe, the news spread across Raleigh. Newspapers, television, social media, everyone was talking about the same name, Malik, the homeless boy who saved billionaire Bernard Green. But Bernard did not shy away from the noise. On the contrary, he chose to face it, openly, transparently, and with absolute resolve. One afternoon, in the grand auditorium of the city's community center, Bernard stepped onto the podium. He was not dressed in one of his expensive suits. Instead, he wore only a simple shirt, sleeves rolled high. Beside him sat Malik, quiet, his worn-out shoes replaced with a brand-new pair of sneakers, yet his eyes still carried the same innocence and honesty. Journalists, business leaders, students, and ordinary citizens packed the hall. Everyone wanted to hear firsthand the truth behind the story that had shaken the city. Bernard leaned closer to the microphone, his voice deep and warm yet unwavering. Last week, I nearly lost my life at a dining table. The hall fell utterly silent. And the person who saved me was not a doctor, not a bodyguard, but a boy who had nothing but a clear gaze and pure courage. His eyes turned to Malik, then back to the crowd. This boy taught me a lesson I had forgotten for 70 years. That true value is not measured by wealth or power, but by whether we dare to show up to defend what is right, even when we have nothing in our hands. The applause thundered like a storm. Bernard paused for a moment, then continued. Today, I am announcing the creation of the Malik Foundation to support homeless children, those whom the world seems to have forgotten, but who carry within themselves extraordinary strength and courage. Because if Malik had no place to go, no one to trust, then we would have lost a hero. The entire hall rose to its feet, applause crashing without end. Many wiped away tears. Malik, still sitting quietly, bowed his head and whispered, just loud enough for Bernard to hear. I didn't save you to change my life. I just didn't want to see anyone get hurt. Bernard smiled, his aged hand resting gently on the You, if only you dared to speak up, show up, and act. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Deep Life Tales, and share this story so that others too may be reminded. True strength does not lie in the wallet, but in a heart that stands on the side of truth.